Welcome to the November 24th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. We continue to operate in a virtual environment and will likely do so through the end of the year. I would like to ask for patience as we use this platform for our public meetings. There may be slight delays as we transition between speakers, presentations, and participants. If any participants have issues with the technology, please send a message to the moderator, Ray. We have 8 discussion items and 2 committee reports on our agenda today. 2 of the items are listed under old business. I would ask that commission members to focus comments and questions on the identified outstanding issues for these 2 requests. The remaining items listed under new business will receive a full staff and applicant presentation, and we will hear from any member of the public who has signed up to speak. I would also ask the commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusion of all presentations and any public comments. Finally, please be recognized by the chairperson before speaking. With a full agenda discussion today, I would ask everyone to be efficient with their time so we can discuss all items. Public comment. This is an opportunity for persons to speak on an item that does not appear on the agenda. There is no one signed up to speak this morning. Moving on to committee reports. There are 2 committee reports this morning. First, there's a committee of the whole report from the November 19th, 2020 meeting. During this meeting, the commission finished discussion of Z2419, which is a rezoning on Raleigh Beach Road. The committee discussed this item on 3 occasions and has thoroughly vetted the request. The committee unanimously recommended approval of this request. With that, I would like to entertain a motion to recommend approval of Z2419. Commissioner Hicks.
I move approval of Z2419.
Thank you, and I will second. Commissioner Nix has offered a motion to approve, and I have seconded that motion. I will now ask Janitha for a roll call of members to record their individual votes.
Okay.
Excuse me, before you get started on that, Commissioner Hicks, on your motion, could you just address consistency with the comprehensive plan and reasonableness?
Sure. Give me 1 second here.
Thank you.
Hold on. Z2419 is consistent with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan with the policies of density transitions, buffering requirements, infill development, protection of water features and frontage, and therefore it is in the public interest.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Hicks. Is that satisfactory?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
If it's agreeable to your second, then you can go ahead and take the vote.
I affirm. We can continue with Janitha. Thank you.
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
That was me.
All right. Thank you. All right. Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox.
Aye.
Commissioner Hicks.
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman.
Aye.
Commissioner Mann.
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver,
Aye.
Chair Tomasulo,
Aye.
and Commissioner Winters.
Aye.
Matt, you're muted.
Sorry about that. The second committee report is from the November 17th Text Change Committee. The committee continued discussion about TC 820, which would alter the short-term rental regulations. After discussion, the committee has recommended a time extension of 45 days. The committee discussed potential alterations to the ordinance that would place a maximum number of days in the year that an entire dwelling unit could be rented. And this is primarily in the context of focusing on providing much needed housing in residential districts. I understand the staff has included a draft ordinance that achieves this request. I would like to ask for a quick update from staff. David York will speak to this.
Yeah, just briefly, staff after the meeting on the 19th, on the 19th, discussed that City Council is not obligated, obviously, to grant the extension of time that's requested. And so we felt it appropriate to go ahead and prepare a draft as best we could along the lines of the discussion of the committee. So you all could take a look at it and either make a motion to approve that version or make a motion for an extension with an alternate to approve that version if they don't extend it. That way you have some of the preferred edits documented in your report to the City Council. So that's why there's that second version in the packet. But obviously you can just limit your action today to a request for additional time. But we wanted to provide those options with you because council's not obligated to grant the additional time. They could just take the case. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Miller.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Just wanted to thank staff for the quick turnaround with us. Really appreciate that and that extra work. The only other trick I'd say is under Section 4 in revocation of a permit. This says that it can be revoked if you have 2 or more verified violations. But given, and I would just want to tweak that to add that the violations of I and J, in terms of how many days per year something can be rented, that there should only be 1 violation of those before the permit is revoked, as opposed to just letting people double it without recourse.
Hey, I'm not like I did not realize that was the intent of this being on here, even being the chairperson. And so I understand the sentiment and appreciate it, but I mean, we don't have time to talk about and debate this today. And I'd really hope that the council can honor the 45-day extension.
I just wanted to add one additional note in case they don't. I was looking at the staff report, and I was. It looks like it has not been updated. In case it does go to council, the staff report does not include any of the details or just any of our discussion that we had at the text change committee meeting. So the reasons why we made any of these changes are not in the record. And so so that's the one tweak that I was saying to the text change. But then in addition, if this is going to go to the council, I would request that the staff report be updated to reflect our conversation at the text change committee meeting. And a couple of key points. One, that Raleigh is the #1 city in the entire United States for iBuyer or corporate buyer transactions where they're buying homes, where companies are buying homes instead of individuals. Number two, we spoke to an expert from the UNC School of Government, and we reviewed over a dozen case studies that demonstrated that short-term regulations that are not narrowly tailored lead to decreased housing stock, increased housing prices, and increased long-term rental prices. And then number three, call out another specific statistic from our School of Government expert who said that in Venice Beach, 12.5% of the housing stock from the zoning regulation standpoint were permitted to have short-term rentals, and that was one of the highest in the nation, and that has led to a housing crisis in Venice Beach. So based on those three statistics, just encouraging council to keep this narrowly tailored to make sure that we allow this sort of flexibility to homeowners while not encouraging additional corporations to buy up the housing stock in Raleigh.
Commissioner Hicks.
I also just wanted to add to that I would hope that council would grant us our extension that we're requesting, as I have some questions about this text change and want to just state in my opinion that this is not a form of housing, it's a form of overnight lodging, and therefore it is not consistent with zoning for housing or removing housing barriers under the comprehensive plan. Thank you. And I'm ready to take a vote.
I guess I'll add on to that, Commissioner Hicks, that it is designated as a commercial use. And if it's a primary use, it would be a primary commercial use in a residential district as opposed to a secondary use. And, you know, the other two things that we didn't have a chance to talk about in the last text change is the multi-unit living. You know, I know that we did not think that was adequate or okay for 25% to be short-term rental. And so would like to strike that and want to make sure that it's clear that we clarify for an accessory dwelling how that is viewed through this, because the idea is that if someone's building an accessory dwelling, it should be used for long-term residence, not short-term rental. So I don't know what language that is, but sorry, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you, Chair Tomasillo. I just wanted to echo what Commissioner Hicks said and what you were just beginning to say. I hope council will honor the request for an extension as well, because when we talked about ADUs and we had added language in about short-term rentals, when it got to council, they removed it and said it would be addressed in the short-term rental text change. And to my knowledge, it is not yet. So I would hope they would grant us the extension so we could have more conversations around that and get some language in there about that.
Thank you. Okay. And one final note.
This is more for staff. Can we get days that, I mean, I'm sure it's clearly outlined which days that this is going to come to council, because to Commissioner Bennett's point that council kind of has stripped a lot of our text change comments in the past. And I think that there's a lot of context that's missing. So maybe it, I think in the past, at times, commissioners have been able to show up at the council meetings and discuss key points. And I'm wondering if there could be, a deliberate opportunity to engage Planning Commission, especially on text changes, or for another one might be Downtown South, for us to show up and, just give, have somebody be a key speaker and give the high points of our discussion. They're important discussion points, and I know that they're busy. They may not have an opportunity to read through everything, but I think it's really important that, our deliberation is considered.
We simply suspended the tradition of the chair being present at the council meetings as a safety protocol, since most of the time all that's happening at the council meeting is that the public hearings are being scheduled. However, there is no reason that the chair cannot show up to give a full representation of the commission's thinking and deliberations to the city council as part of the report of the planning commission.
Matt, I think that that would be really important for some of these.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if it's permitted that I can, then I will. Mr. Winters.
Just want to add, and I understand with time constraints and everything else, but if also a statement could be read on your behalf, just something of your presence and the wording for us and representation for us towards them if you cannot physically be there virtually, I think would also be very helpful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'll go ahead and work on that, and I'll I'll just keep you all apprised with what the delivery approach is. But I think that those are both good ideas.
One other note is that should for any reason you not receive the time extension, there would be one more opportunity for the Planning Commission to take action on this item, which would be your December 8 meeting. Since the actual deadline is December 21, as long as you act within the deadline, it won't get to the council before January.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think that reduces a little bit of the urgency need. And I'll plan on reaching out to folks on council about this, just so everyone knows. Commissioner Fox?
With Mr. Bauer's clarification there, I'm ready to make a motion to request a 45-day extension.
Commissioner Winters?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. And I guess I'm a little confused because this was on the consent agenda, or was it?
It's on the committee report.
Sorry. Okay. So I will now ask Chinitha to go ahead and take roll call for commissioner votes.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox?
Aye.
Commissioner Hicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner Mann?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
Chair Thomasula?
Aye.
Commissioner Winters?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. That motion passes unanimously, 10-0. So now moving on to sorry, I just was not expecting a discussion there. Moving on to the consent agenda, which is a list of requests that can be acted upon in one motion. There are two zoning cases on the consent agenda. Zoning case Z3420 has been deemed inconsistent and would be referred to the January Committee of the Whole. That said, the applicant did reach out, and I also spoke to staff this morning that they prefer to keep it at the table, having just received the report a few days ago, and they would like to make improvements to their application to try to work towards consistency, which I think is very fair. We would have a chance to hear this at future cases and could still refer it to Committee of the Whole, as our next Committee of the Whole is at the very end of January. So this just gives the applicant some time to respond to staff comments and the staff report. The zoning case Z5020 would be deferred to a future planning commission agenda no later than January 12th. To be clear, the commission is not voting on the final disposition of the applications and is simply deferring discussion to a future agenda. So, Mr. York, do I have to clarify that anymore, the amendment to that consent for Z3420, as long as there's no opposition?
No, if you're, it's okay to make a joint motion. I mean, usually you take one off and then you vote for the consent agenda, but there's just 2 items on the consent agenda. So if you want to make a motion for Z34 to be held at the table and then approve the consent agenda, that's probably the cleanest way to do it since you're not following what the consent agenda says.
Okay. So then I will make a motion to hold Z34 at the table while also deferring Z5020 to a future planning commission meeting. Commissioner O'Haver?
I second that.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. I'll now ask Janitha to go ahead and take roll call over the members.
Commissioner Bennett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fox?
Aye.
Commissioner Hicks?
Aye.
Commissioner Lampman?
Aye.
Commissioner Mann?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Haver?
Aye.
Chair Tomasulo?
Aye.
Commissioner Winters?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. The motion passes unanimously 10-0. We will now move on to old business. These are requests that have appeared on a previous Planning Commission agenda. The first item is item E1. This is case number Z3520. It's a request to rezone approximately 2 acres from R4 and R6 to residential mixed use 3 stories conditional use. We heard from the public at the last meeting, but did not hear a staff or application presentation. The item was held to allow the applicant to submit a neighborhood meeting report and some updated conditions. We will now hear from staff. Matt Clem will present on behalf of staff.
Good morning, Planning Commission. Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
All right, great. So thanks for the introduction, Chair Tomasulo. This is a request to rezone just under 2 acres from residential 4 and residential 6 to residential mixed use with a 3-story height limit and zoning conditions. And your deadline for action is January 11th. You can see here that the zoning in the area is predominantly residential. South of Wade Avenue, that hashing that you see is a special residential parking overlay district, and that is maintained in the rezoning request. Just a aerial look at the area. The site comprises 4 parcels. There's low and moderate density residential development in the broader area. You can see to the east of the site, there's the Gardner Street Trail and Greenway that goes into JC Park. Next slide. A look at the 4 lots from Wade Avenue. Next slide. So there are about 12, I believe, zoning conditions. They limit the overall unit yield to 24, require only residential and special uses to be permitted on the site. So that's all residential uses, and then other civic uses that would be permissible under residential mixed use zoning if a special use permit was granted by the Board of Adjustment. Dormitory, fraternity, and sororities are prohibited. Vinyl siding is prohibited. There are specified cladding materials. So any new building would have to be clad with these, some combination of these materials shown in condition number 5. Each unit in a multi-unit or townhouse product would have some type of roof articulation or element like a gable. Garage doors have to have windows or other decorative elements if there are garages on the units, and all exterior windows should have or shall have decorative trim as well. Rooftop terraces are prohibited. Stormwater runoff is increased beyond what the code minimally requires to treat the 25-year event or contain the event rather. There is a zoning condition that requires individual garbage receptacle and pickup areas per unit. And to the properties to the east, there are 2 properties that would require an 8-foot fence or wall be built as a part of any transition yard that would be required between the 2 lots. A look at the change of existing and proposed entitlement. Right now, you've got 3 units an acre, just over 3 units an acre. We're looking at 12.5 with that 24 unit count. And there are some changes to setbacks as well. The site does have a lower walk and transit score than the city on average, but a higher bicycling score. And the site does permit smaller and more efficient units. This is a bus service in the area. So to the left, the blue route is the Route 4 to Rex Hospital, and to the right is the number 16, the Overland route. The request would add to the housing supply. It does not include subsidized units, and it does permit a variety of housing types in smaller lots than the citywide average, and of course, is within walking distance of those 2 transit routes. Or it's about a half a mile from each. So either way, the request is inconsistent with the low density residential designation on the future land use map, which would support up to 6 units per acre. So this is well beyond that. It is consistent with the plan overall. Here's your look at consistent policies, looking at compact development, mitigating stormwater impacts, zoning for housing. The contextual design and infill compatibility is consistent with those roof articulation standards and the decorative trim standards that were offered in zoning conditions. It is inconsistent with the future land use map and conditional use district consistency because of that. And your deadline is January 11th. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Clem. Excuse me. We'll now hear from Amanda Bambrick, presenting on behalf of the applicant. I believe that there are a few people who will be speaking. The applicant has 10 minutes total amongst speakers to speak. So we'll go ahead and set the time clock, and welcome Amanda whenever ready.
Hey, great. Thank you. Good morning. Amanda Bambrick, Morningstar Law Group here in downtown Raleigh. I also have Josh Swindell from Envision Homes and Angie Petty from Curry Engineering here to take questions. I will be mindful of your time and your busy schedule, so I'm not going to overstate what Matt has already presented. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this is not my presentation. Is there any way we could pause my time while we load my presentation? Are y'all able to find my presentation?
Can we get an affirmative from staff?
We're working on it right now. Give us just a second.
We still got to get that elevator music.
Da, 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 da.
You're a musician, Ken.
Ken just needs to bring an instrument into the office.
Sadly, I have no instrument here.
Yeah.
Ken is upstaging my presentation.
Commissioner Winters?
In the interim, may I ask a question of the developer while we're waiting?
Sure.
Okay. My question is with the conditions or or staff, forgive me, because staff just made the presentation of the conditions that were allotted. Was this volunteered? Was this the initial offering by the developer, or were these negotiated during the community meeting?
Hey, this is Matt Clem. That's a great question. You're looking at let's see. The conditions changed a few times through the process, but the most recent additions were conditions 12 and 11, which require a fence on the southern property line. The individual garbage receptacles and pickup areas, that was added recently. And so those things I know and I was at the meetings when they were discussed, so I believe that they were in response to community comments. I believe that is the same for the third condition, prohibiting dormitory, fraternity, and sorority. So those three, I think, were recent additions that were added in response to community conversation. When the case originally came in, it had the conditions that specified building materials and prohibited vital siding. It had the conditions that required decorative trim and decorative details on the garage doors and the dormer. And I believe, yeah, so I think those are the two sets. It came in with the kind of the decorative trim stuff, the limit to, it was originally, I think, 12 units per acre. They changed it to 24 units. So I think they picked up a unit or two in that change. But there were a few that were in direct response to that community conversation. I hope that's helpful.
It is. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you both. We will now turn it back to the applicant whose presentation we have up.
Great, thank you. If you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. So just real quickly, Envision Homes, they've been in Wake County with 60 years of combined experience. They are experienced in this area. As you know, the project goal here is the ultimate construction of 24 high-quality townhome units. Next slide, please. As Matt indicated, you do see here what is a 4-acre assemblage off of Wade Avenue. Next slide, please. Over the course of the conversations, we have talked extensively with the community, and I would say in response to the question just raised, we've approximately doubled the conditions since the commencement of this project. I'll hit the timeline here in a second. But here are some representative elevations. Obviously, we know we have to go through the extensive site plan process here at the City of Raleigh. We also, next slide, please, have shared sort of what a representative site plan draft, of course, at this point would look like. But again, it's a relatively low impact townhome project. The next slide, if you could hit that, we'll hit the timeline a little bit just to show you. Oh, can you go back a slide, please? So we had been working on this project for a while. Unfortunately, to some degree, we got started in March of 2020, which is, of course, when the world started to melt down, but we went in for the pre-application. We actually held 2 initial neighbor meetings at the 500 feet radius. We continued the discussion in the broader area over the course of the summer. We, like I said, we spent some time really kind of working on the conditions and modifying them. The applicant, my client, who can speak to it if you would like to, has definitely been speaking directly and having on-site meetings with the neighbors, and some of those conversations have continued up until the present. We filed the application in the summer. We had our 1,000-foot radius meeting in September, and as I said, we've kind of continued the broader conversation in the community. Next slide, please. I'll skip a couple of these because I've already essentially gone over them. At this point, we are containing to the 25-year storm. We're actually reducing the overall number of driveways as taking down the 4 parcels essentially into 1. We do expect DOT movement restrictions in the future when we get to driveway permitting. the additional traffic is expected to be extremely minimal here. As you can see in the staff report, we're adding approximately 0.5% to the existing traffic on Wade Avenue. And we know we'll be working with DOT in the future to restrict the movement and any other concerns that they have. In response to some occupancy concerns we had from neighbors, we're restricting rooftop terraces, we're restricting Greek life. We're hoping to mitigate those concerns that way. And again, multiple decorative elements and material requirements are certainly going to guarantee an enhanced product that'll be in harmony with the area. Next slide, please. Matt went through the conditions. Like I said, we've got 12. We've approximately doubled these. We have multiple decorative elements. Next condition, or next page, please. And these are all in direct response to conversations that we've had with the neighbors. And final slide, please. If you look at the staff report, except with the map itself, which we will kick up from low to moderate, which is consistent with what's in the area, that's overall pretty much completely consistent with the comprehensive plan. As the staff report notes, it's consistent with expanding housing choices and growing neighborhoods. It's in harmony with the area. These uses have coexisted in this neighborhood for generations. And it is a more affordable type of housing than what would be permitted under the current zoning. And with all of that said, we would respectfully request your recommendation for approval. Thank you. We're all here for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Bambrick. We did take public comment at our last meeting, and I understand that some of the same people have signed up to speak today. We just need a vote to allow additional time for these people to speak. Without objection, I would like to grant each speaker 2 minutes. I would ask that the speaker not be repetitive and to focus on new information. Seeing no opposition, then we'll move forward with the speakers who are signed up.
All right, first we have Kevin Hopper. Don, that's the presentation that you pulled up first.
Can everyone hear me? Yes.
Yes, sir.
You. All right. I would request to be able to view the time clock as well.
Can you see it okay? You might have to click to the side.
Yes, I can see it now. Thank you, Chair Tomasola. All right. Neighbors have previously spoken and written extensively regarding the critical safety concern of rezoning for density at the specific location on the steepest blind hill on Wade Avenue. While I believe this clear danger itself should be enough to reject the rezoning proposal, I wanted to highlight other significant concerns that my family has, which have not been adequately addressed by the applicant. The first one is on the next slide, stormwater. As a reminder, my property sits directly downhill east of the proposed rezoning. Stormwater runoff on this dense development remains a key concern for my family and property. Clear cutting and the vast addition of impervious surface for the steep grade will cause significant stormwater issues, endangering my house and yard. This will most certainly worsen over the next decades, almost guaranteeing substantial adverse impact on my residents downhill. What the applicant proposes right now with the 25-year stormwater is insufficient to mediate these effects at this specific location. And I really ask the commission to please don't allow my house to be flooded by the proposed rezoning. Next slide, please. Neighborhood transitions and land use. The zoning change here is quite dramatic and really should give pause. The intent of RX zoning is to serve as a land use transition between other mixed use districts and residential neighborhoods per the UDO. The current parcels are on mostly R4 zoning, which is reasonable given the topography and specific location on Wade, but the parcels are completely surrounded by low-density residential. This area is neither a city growth center nor a designated priority corridor for the comprehensive plan growth framework map. It is a residential neighborhood. RX3 will allow for 50 foot in height versus only a 40-foot max in R4. 24 attached units on this, which is 3 to 4 times currently allowed density. These units will sit 20 foot higher up a steep hill from 1 to 2 story residences, and the units will directly overlook the formerly secluded and peaceful backyards of 8 residences. Next slide, please. I appreciate the time today. I just want to say it is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. There are some very specific elements that I believe the planners missed in this. And in the final slide there, in conclusion, I just wanted to be able to say that the proposed rezoning is unreasonable and not in the public interest for a large number of issues. Thank you.
Next, we have Janelle Vigini.
All right, thank you.
Can you pull up my slide, please? I'm just waiting on my presentation to load.
Yes, staff, do you have an update? Is that great? All right, it looks like we're ready to go.
Thank you. If we could just go to slide 2. Appreciate it. Good morning. My name is Chanel Vicini and I live on Gardner Street. As mentioned last week, Wade Avenue is a dangerous stretch. And at this particular point, there's going to be a left turn barrier at the proposed development. As a result, all westbound traffic will have to loop around the neighborhood. This includes drivers leaving the development and those wish to return to the development after traveling west. And as we can see here, there's about 2 to 3 crashes per month on this half-mile stretch of land right in front of the proposed development. We could go to the next slide, please. As shown last week, this is the anticipated traffic pattern. If drivers don't turn on Gardner, the next place to loop around is 6 to 10 minutes out of the way past JC Park. Thus, development traffic will be looping around the neighborhood. At the corner of Gardner and Wade, there's no stoplight nor crosswalk, and this is over a 90-degree turn, which makes this intersection just so dangerous. And as mentioned by your staff, there's also a greenway right there, which has a lot of pedestrians and is just one of the most dangerous areas. We could go back to my presentation, but to slide 4. Just the next slide. Thank you. Again, these streets are extremely narrow. On Bar Meddler, the drivers face hilly terrain its entire length. The lack of sidewalks causes pedestrians to always be in the road, as we can see here. This includes families and kids walking to JC Park Trails entrance on Gardner Street. And if we can go to the next slide, we can see that not only are the roads narrow, but there's very poor sight lines and there's a lot of blind turns. Can we go to the next slide? Over there. Thank you. There's a lot of blind turns around all of these bends, and cars coming around these twists and turns are never able to see each other, as we can see on slide 6, please. Overall, unless there is a major renovation to these roadways for public safety, it is not possible to safely accommodate the additional traffic generated by 24 townhomes. Rezoning is inconsistent with the future land use map, which took into account this area's lack of sidewalks, narrow streets, and dual-sided parking, which makes increased density a significant threat to pedestrian safety. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Next is Jennifer Stevenson.
Thank you. Are we waiting for a presentation or?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
It seems like we're having trouble finding Jennifer's presentation. Matt, okay, Matt just sent it.
Sorry, say that again.
It seemed like we were having a little trouble finding her presentation, but I think we should have it now.
Okay.
We actually have additional speakers. If you want to just move on to one of them,
Can we just move on to those if we have them ready?
there it is. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
That's not actually it, but that's okay. Well, but yeah, that's not the presentation.
Is this someone else's?
No, that's something that I sent separately to the Planning Commission just about the traffic pattern as part of my letter to the commission.
Okay. Did you want to wait until we have your presentation up?
I would, if that's okay.
Okay,
Thank you. Oh, there it is. There we go.
great.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Stevenson, and my family and I live in one of the surrounding properties in Gardner. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of the neighborhood. I spoke last time, but I did want to reiterate that we believe that the rezoning proposal as it's presented should be denied, specifically as it relates to the proposed increase in the density. The developer has mentioned that they made concessions based on the neighborhood meetings, but they were very minor in our opinion, and did not address the significant concerns that we had related to the traffic and the density. And the stormwater was just sort of, it helps some, but it's not going to do what it should. So on the density in particular, our compromise would be to have something like R10 zoning so that it allows townhomes, but with a cap at 6 units per acre to maintain the low density designation. I think my presentation went away. If we can go to the next slide, please. I think the biggest concern is that there's a 70-foot elevation change across the section of the neighborhood. And so, the way that the lot juts back and is surrounded on 3 sides by the single family homes, the proposed change has a really high impact on the neighbors. And you can even see these townhomes within the surrounding streets of the neighborhood, where they would be, towering into the air up to 90 feet above the surrounding homes. And so something of this height could be seen from the surrounding streets. And I think that, something that could be achieved if the density was decreased is that there could be more green space and trees to flourish to replace the current landscape, and a similar square footage per unit could possibly be achieved in 2 stories instead of 3. And that would be a much less drastic change for the neighborhood. We'd also like to ask that the mature privacy trees be required on all 3 sides of the facing neighborhood. The sides facing the neighborhood. I think that the developer has addressed some very minor concerns that the neighbors have had, but I did send a petition that was signed by all of the neighbors surrounding the property, the proposed properties. And I think that speaks for itself, that the main concern is around the density, and that really it's the root of all the other issues that the neighbors are having. And that has they failed to address that issue. As well as the traffic. So I think that for that reason, it's inconsistent with the surrounding neighborhood, and it's inconsistent with the future land use map. We would ask you to uphold that. And so we would strongly urge you to deny this as it's presented. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ray, next speaker, please.
Next we have Craig Sullivan.
Hello, actually, I contacted JP when I signed up, letting him know I was not planning on giving a talk. Rather, I authored the detailed documents on traffic and public safety and on stormwater. I've sent both of them to the commissioners twice, and the abstracts once or twice. And in particular, the public safety document is very detailed analysis of the traffic situation on Wade Avenue. And so I just wanted to be available this morning in case the commissioners have questions. I'd be astounded if they didn't. Otherwise, pass my time on.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Ray, next speaker, please.
Next will be Christina Calger.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. This is Christina Calger. Can you hear me? This is Christina Calger.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much for the chance to speak. I'm a neighbor. I live one house south of Wade on Gardner. And I want to address the claims about affordable housing. I support the concerns about traffic and stormwater raised by other speakers. But in particular, as you know, Raleigh has a crisis of affordable housing with over 16,000 households now paying rent in excess of 50% of their incomes. And this development does nothing to address this crisis, which is likely to get worse in the near future. These 24 townhomes, we're told by the developer, will cost around $500,000 a piece. And while that might be less than the value of some neighboring properties, it is certainly nowhere near affordable. Nothing in this proposal helps us to address the crisis of affordable housing, eviction, and homelessness that we have. It is my understanding that the Planning Commission and the Council still have guidelines on the books that expect affordable units to be part of new developments. And I understand that the guideline is supposed to be somewhere between 5 and 15%, depending on how long the units are likely to remain affordable in price or rent. So with 24 units, we should be requiring that at least 3 or 4 be affordable and genuinely affordable, not $500,000. And I see nothing in this proposal that does that. So I believe that the concerns about traffic are real. I do support increased density if it furthers the goal of encouraging mass transit. I don't see how this development is going to do that. And instead, I think the development is going to aggravate our already serious problem of lack of affordable housing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ray, next speaker, please.
That's what we have. That's all.
Okay, great. Commissioners, for either the applicant or the additional community members who spoke. And changing screens. Commissioner Fox.
Question for staff, likely transportation staff specifically. Is there a STIP project that covers this portion of Wade?
Do we have Jason Myers?
Sorry, this is Jason Myers of Transportation. I had to leave the meeting earlier and had to wait to be unmuted by the host. There is not NCDOT STIP project funded in this area of Wade Avenue. And I don't know that one's coming very soon in this area.
Can you repeat that part again?
I said there is nothing funded or programmed in this area of Wade Avenue right now. There is a sidewalk project by the city of Raleigh near here on the other side of Wade Avenue that is nearing construction, but nothing that's NCDOT or kind of roadway related.
Okay, follow-up question. The applicant had mentioned that there might be restricted movement associated or anticipated during permitting. Can you relay to us what that might look like, and if there's only one solution to that, or if there might be a series of infrastructure improvements?
Yes, it may be difficult for me to predict exactly how an NCDOT engineer will review that driveway permit. But I think it's fair to presume that something very much like a development opposite Duplin Road, maybe a third of the mile to the west. I'm going to measure that on my iMaps right now. It's between Brooks and Dixie Trail that was built a few years ago is probably a similar result where there's a right-in, right-out driveway. Were some other frontage improvements in there as a part of that development, but there is what we often informally call a pork chop, helping to enforce that you can't turn left in or out. Part of the reason for that is to avoid people turning left into a development on Wade Avenue from causing both crashes and severe backups on Wade Avenue. And part of it is to make sure that people aren't trying to turn left and making risky moves for themselves and others turning out of a development. So that's probably a fair assumption of what the product that they showed would result in from an NCDOT review.
Thank you, Commissioner Fox and Mr. Myers. I guess another follow-on question to that, trying to understand some of the transportation interpretation, since that has been something that a lot of the community members have spoken about. I mean, it looks like there's one, it's taking it from 4 driveways to 1 driveway. And would if new houses were built on these, they could keep their driveway as it is, correct? Or no?
Yes, sir. If they were if existing lots were redeveloped as existing lots, they would be able to keep their existing driveways. There is the possibility that some of these lots may be sized, they could be subdivided or recombined in some way that might result in 1 additional driveway, but I'm not at all certain of that, and would have to ask our planning staff about minimum lot widths and minimum lot sizes to know that for sure. But those 4 driveways can remain through a redevelopment scenario that still has 4 separate units on 4 separate lots.
Okay. And so I guess to clarify, I guess some of the notes about this possibly actually being either negligible or better outcome is because it's limiting driveways and because it's limiting the left-hand turn?
I don't think that there is no staff determination of weighing those pros and cons. There would be more traffic generated. I think the estimated math is about 11 more AM trips and 11 more PM trips during those peak hours. And that certainly creates at least one small change that I think that the neighbors that spoke, are correct, that those will be issues, and that is a pretty steep hill, and it is a bit of a concern, but that is mitigated by the access management and the lack of driveways and the ability to, I don't know if any of those driveways people now have to back out, for instance, but I can't weigh for you how you or city council would want to consider those issues. Just understand that there is there is something we can see as a pro and something we can see as a con.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lampman.
So I think the one thing that we should be keeping in mind too is that, are we setting precedents along this roadway? Wade Avenue freaks me out just driving down it. So, if we're going to rezone this, would there possibly be, setting precedents of rezoning up and down Wade? And if we did, things change over time. If this is the direction Wade Avenue is going down, it certainly needs to be widened, but there's no way of doing that now. So with each incremental rezone, do we start to require that there's a setback for a potential future expansion? And then that way we can start to think about this type of development along that way. And so if so, then the applicant would need to give up additional space so that, that roadway could be built in the future. But all of this gets really complicated. So overall, this area is, I do not agree with expansion and higher density along Wade, especially after a hill. It's a very dangerous road.
Commissioner Lampman, may I address a part of that was related to, I guess, a technical question? They would be required to dedicate half of the standard for a 4-lane divided avenue in our comp plan, which is 52 feet from the center line. And I can't measure exactly on IMAPs how much that is, but if that other development I mentioned down the street did do that at that time, and so there would be an additional right of way created that would incrementally help facilitate that in the long term. One of the things that would happen if there were much larger scale redevelopment, that went from corner to corner, is that we would probably take that access off of the side streets and maybe even have alleys that kind of go from one side street to the other, and there would be no driveways on Wade Avenue. But given that this assemblage is the only place that touches the right of way is on Wade Avenue, they're entitled to some amount of access on Wade Avenue.
Thank you for that clarification. I believe Commissioner Bennett, did you still have a question?
Yes, thank you. I believe Matt said early in his comments that the applicant had gone from 12 units to 24 units. And I was curious about that. Why the increase in units?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if when the application originally came in, they specified a density of 12 units per acre. And that 12 units per acre times the 1.91 acres yielded 22.92 units. And so what they did, they changed how they calculated density in the zoning condition. Instead of doing it by density, they have just said the site will be developed with no more than 24 units. And so I think they changed it because when they did their original calculation, they thought they would have a 24 unit product, when we told them, in fact, we think you can only do 22.92 based on the units per acre you're offering and the size of the property. Is just that simple arithmetic. And so they said, well, we think we need 24. So they added an extra 1.08 units essentially to that by saying the maximum unit yield on the site will be 24. And it's fine that they, well, I would say zoning conditions can do it either way. They can agree to a maximum unit yield, or they can restrict to a maximum density. And so they just changed from a density calculation to a unit maximum. So that was the change, and sorry for the confusion on that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fox.
I just want to clarify also, if this were to be approved, this requires an amendment to the future land use map from low density residential to moderate. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bennett.
Thanks. I'm sorry. One more question and a comment. I think perhaps this is something that maybe we can take up in Commissioner Winter's strategic planning, but in our staff reports, when we have the discussion on affordability, I think we need to understand what we mean by affordability, because if we're saying this improves housing affordability because it's giving housing options, it's improving the housing supply, but it's a $500,000 townhouse, who's that affordable to? Perhaps it is affordable to the target market. What's the target market? These are the kinds of things I think we need to think about as we're moving forward, particularly as we're talking about equity and land use planning. I also noted, this is just kind of an aside, but when I was reading the staff report, the public benefit said a desirable place to live inside the Beltline. These are the kinds of things that, as we're moving forward and looking at language in the comprehensive plan, language is important. That's kind of a subjective statement. Is it a public benefit because it's inside the Beltline that's automatically beneficial to the public? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But I think those are the kinds of things that we just kind of need to be looking out for as we're moving forward and as we're trying to look at these through a lens of equity. Inside the Beltline, neighborhood character, those types of things we need to be paying attention to and maybe having some more discussions about.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Bennett. Commissioner Fox.
The primary outstanding inconsistency I see with the comp plan is related to that issue of low density residential versus moderate density residential. So question to the applicant, have you have you considered conditions to mitigate for that increase in density, acknowledging that that would likely change your proposed maximum number of units?
To clarify that I'm understanding the question correctly, are you asking if we have considered doing lower density?
Correct.
We have, however, due to the cost of materials, cost of land, it is not economically feasible for a successful project.
Okay, thank you. I had another clarification around the most recent 2 or 3 conditions. Is stormwater staff on with us? Ray?
Yeah, I just unmuted Ashley Rogers. Are you there?
Is that Ashley? Hello?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had to step away for a second.
Oh, that's okay. I was just curious to get a little bit more, I guess, clarification on, I'm looking at a map at an aerial, and I see there are, looks like 4 new houses built in the last 2 to 3 years immediately behind the properties in question. And it looks like they were pretty much clear cut. And they're large, kind of empty backyards. And so I was just kind of curious what sort of stormwater controls and standards, if these lots were redeveloped like that versus as proposed with the enhanced conditions.
Sure. So I would have to know exactly how those were developed. Let me see if I can pull that up real fast.
It's just
Okay.
an
It looks
existing
like,
family house.
oh yes, I know, but they're 2 different kind of levels of stormwater controls. And it depends on the size and type of development that's going on. So it looks like those that are, you're talking about the ones off Canterbury?
Yes.
Yes. So it looks like those were part of a recombination. And so they would have more than likely been developed under the maximum impervious based on the zoning, because they're more than likely grandfathered lots. So for example, an R10 zoning would give you 65% impervious, and R4, 38%, et cetera. However, the same single family type development, if we were talking about this particular set of lots, because of the size of it being over an acre, this would be subject to runoff and nitrogen. So they're 2 different standards, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. What if these were just redeveloped as large $1.2 million houses like we see in this area? If the ones were maintained?
Absolutely. Then it would be based on the zoning. These are zoned R6, it looks like right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
So an R6 lot would be entitled to 51% impervious, or the existing, whichever is greater.
So it's only impervious. There's no degree of storm that you would be controlling for?
That's correct. On these grandfathered lots, if they're not subject to runoff and nitrogen, which is our higher level active stormwater controls, then the only stormwater requirement in terms of treatment or restrictions are a max impervious based on the zoning. No rate control is required, and no other treatment is required if they stay within those percentages based on the zoning.
Okay. And then for a recombination subdivision, is that a standard level
So recombination would keep things the same on these lots.
Okay.
Subdivision, 1 acre, over 1 acre subdivision kicks in the higher level stormwater requirements. And so an over 1 acre subdivision would be subject to rate control, leaving the property, and also nutrient requirements.
And what level is that to?
So that's determined by the state requirements. The rate control is that for the 2 and 10-year storm, you have no greater rate leaving the site after development than you did before. And so that's where the proposed condition is going above and beyond current code in that they're adding that 25-year storm in, because code would only require 2 and 10. And then nutrient level treatment, they would have to essentially somehow get their nutrient loading to 3.6 pounds per acre per year is the target. A residential development can do treatment to get to 6 pounds per acre per year, and then essentially do a buy down to a mitigation bank for the remainder. But those are the 2 basic requirements for a project, a subdivision of this size.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful knowledge. And then I guess the second half, I guess, might be for the applicant, the final condition around the buffer or fencing. Was that a result of a direct conversation with those neighbors? And kind of what other specifics, like how are those details determined, whether it's a wall or a fence? Ray, are we able to get the applicant back on?
Hey, sorry, I was waiting to be unmuted. This is Amanda, and Josh had a bit of a timing conflict with another hearing, so I'm not sure if he's still on with us. But my understanding is that and if you look at the specific PIN numbers, that those were the result of direct conversations that he had with those neighbors, and I believe it's been a bit of an ongoing conversation. So, but to your larger point, yes, those have been specific to neighbor conversations.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Miller.
In those conversations with neighbors, did they discuss tree conservation in that buffer?
Hey, so this is Amanda. Can somebody unmute Andy Petty, please? He's the engineer.
Hi, this is Andy. Yeah, there was discussions about trying to preserve particular trees. There's some nicer, larger trees out there that we're trying to locate and we actually revamped the site from the initial layout that we showed at one of the first neighborhood meetings to actually see if we could clear up some room to save some of those larger trees that are near the perimeter. As I'm sure you guys are aware, because the site's under 2 acres, it's not subject to tree conservation, but the idea is to save trees if we can. Obviously, that's in the best interest of everybody. I mean, Raleigh is the city of oaks, and one of the things that makes a very nice development is really nice landscaping and nice foliage and trees. So any of those mature trees that we can save, the intent is to save them, and we try to put those buffers in those areas where they were at. Obviously, we're not far enough along with the site plan to guarantee any of that stuff, because we don't have surveys or any of that stuff to know exactly where they're at. And a lot goes into saving trees, such as tree canopy areas and making sure we don't disturb in the root zone too much. But overarching, the goal is to try to save those areas.
And so when we're talking, excuse me, about this buffer area, you said it's the 2 adjacent properties to the east, so this would be the Gardner Street properties. I know there's been some discussion and concern from the neighbors about, due to the topography and grading, since it has a higher since the applicant's property has a higher elevation, that it would have sort of a considerable impact on those neighbors. How would an 8-foot tall wall, do you look at that in terms of the wall or fence height comparatively? Because it looks like it could be built up to 50 feet tall and that it's on a higher elevation.
Yeah, it is on a higher.
Where does 8
elevation.
foot come from?
8 feet is kind of from what the ordinance generally recommends for those barriers as far as 8 foot tall. And typically your privacy fences are usually 6 feet or 8 feet tall. So it's kind of going in those nominal dimensions of standard construction types. I'm sure you could build a 50-foot wall, but I don't think anybody really wants to look at a 50-foot wall either. The whole purpose behind the wall and the fence is to kind of preclude you from seeing some of the things that you may not necessarily want to see, like cars, parking lots, those kind of things, not necessarily screening a building. So those are the things that the wall is trying to hide or trying to bury you from, or trying to create that transition for you.
Gotcha. Were there any other type of screening or buffers that you guys discussed with the neighbors that they wanted?
Not that I'm really aware of. I don't remember us discussing anything else. I mean, mostly your barriers and screening buffers are generally regulated to vegetation or some sort of hard barrier like a wall or a fence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Want to kind of bring it back to the table. Oh, Commissioner Hicks.
Yeah, so follow up to that question. What is this application required to provide by the UDO in terms of wall and fencing and plantings? And if they're not required to provide them, I would like to see some additional conditioning that specifies exactly where the fence is going. Looks like it's just addressing 2 properties that it's adjacent to. I'd like for that to include more properties, and then also some specificity on what type of plantings, what the spacing would be provided, since there's no TCA required, kind of as a way to commit to providing a buffer between them and the residents. Is that something that the applicant would be willing to consider?
Gosh, Amanda, I mean, that's a little outside my realm of expertise there.
Yeah, I mean, we could discuss it. I know the goal is to move forward today, given where we are on the timeline. My understanding is that, and I don't know if it makes sense to look back at the aerial, that the fencing was limited to 2 properties because that was really, because this is kind of like an upside down L shape. I'm not sure that the 2 properties referenced are the only 2 that are actually kind of in the immediate vicinity of the project. So that's why it was limited there. This is a pretty small kind of 4 parcel assemblage, and we were speaking directly to the direct concerns of those 2 specific neighbors. So I'm not clear that the fencing could go farther than that, because that would be off-site at that point. So that's why it wasn't intended to be some sort of intentional limitation. That's as far as our site goes, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner Hicks.
I guess I'm not clear on what 2 properties those refer to. Because when I look at the map, I see this property abutting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 properties.
So Chair Hicks, to answer that question, if you're looking at the map and the farthest right property included in the rezoning request, which is the L-shaped property as the applicant referred to it, the 2 properties where the fence or wall would be required would be the immediately adjacent property to the east that fronts on Wade Avenue. That property backs up to the 3rd property south on Gardner Street. So those 2 properties are the properties that would contain a wall or fence as required in the zoning condition. Otherwise, the transition standards for mixed use development in the code would require that zone A, so the transition requirements have 3 parts. The first part is zone A, which is what is required when you have residential mixed use of no more than 3 stories adjacent to residentially zoned property. So zone A would be required here. That's the only yard that would be required. And there are 3 options of a zone A yard that could be chosen, type 1, type 2, and type 3, and they range from 10 to 50 feet in width. So how that works is when someone comes up with a site plan, they say, you know, they elect which of those yards that they will build, and any of the 3 of them are compliant with the requirements of the code. And so they've added specificity to what that yard would contain, and they have said that it would contain an 8-foot fence for those 2 properties.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, also, and I'm trying to figure out if we're going to have consensus or not to move this forward, because, we're definitely getting some questions. I also was notified by the moderator that some of the neighboring speakers said that they did request additional privacy screening trees and specific types. And a question to the applicant: what did they ask for, and was that? And I guess what's your kind of response to that?
So that's not really consistent with my understanding. My understanding is that, Josh had multiple on-site visits, and the discussion really centered around, there's got to be a balance between a wall that screens adequately and provides what the neighbors requested versus, building essentially a great wall, which ultimately doesn't work for the project and isn't going to be something that everybody wants to see. So I feel like the applicant has worked, again, as you saw,